Hello, everybody. This is Randy Wootton, CEO of Maxio, and your host of SaaS Expert Voices, the podcast that brings the SaaS experts to you to talk about what's happening today and what they think is going to happen tomorrow. With me, I am super excited to have Lihong Hicken join me today. She's got this incredible career that started in China. She's been a sales executive, she's been a CCO, she's now a CEO of an early stage startup. And we're going to talk about her journey, what she's learning about chief customer officers, and what's happening with one of those key metrics around churn, the research report that she has produced. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a CEO. So thank you for joining me, Lihong.
Thank you for having me, Randy. Hi, I'm Lihong Hicken. I'm a co-founder and CEO of TheySaid. So TheySaid we're in the business of improving NRR, but not in the sense of like traditional NRR CSP, like looking at product usage. So we're actually bringing in voice of customer, more like life cycle voice of customer into the decision making process for executives and for revenue teams to generate more revenue from their existing customers. So that's what I'm doing now. And thank you, Randy, for inviting me to this podcast today.
Yeah, I'm going to be really excited to talk more about that specifically at They Said. But I want to go back to where you met your husband. You were in China, and you describe in your profile that you're a big travel enthusiast. I think you were literally a travel guide in China. And so just say a little bit more about where you met your husband and the joke that you guys have.
Yeah, totally. So when I met my husband, I was working in the world's largest adventure travel company. So it's not like
Ah,
just easy one. Like easy for us would be like hiking on the Great Wall for 5 hours. That would be like I wouldn't even break a sweat. I was really fit. So doing all adventure things like hiking through difficult tiger leaping gorge, or like when other people are taking airplanes, we're taking trains, we're riding the bikes, and we're doing canoeing. So all this crazy kind of things that young people do or older
yeah,
people do. So and then I
yeah.
met my husband in a Buddhist monastery in the middle of China, on the way to the toilet. That's kind of a short story. And then he kind of joked that I'm his expensive Chinese import. And I was like, you know what? I'm your best investment from China. So
There you
so
go.
it's a different view. So we joke about this a lot. Yeah.
And that's great. So how long have you been in the States, Li Hong?
I moved here in 2000, that's it, 2013. It's probably
2013. So it's been 10 years, and
10,
you've had
11
quite the
years.
journey. You started.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess 11 now, 2024, but you've had quite the journey. You started off as sales. That's got to be exceptionally hard because you weren't, I mean, you were fluent in English in the job that you were in China, but just the contextual relevance that you had to have to go into sales. How did you pick sales as your first foray into business in the US?
Yeah, totally. It's funny because my major in China was English major, but I have a little bit of Aussie accent because I work for Australian company. So it's kind of a
Ah,
weird Aussie Chinese accent. And then when I come here, like I don't have any skill, like anyone already have that. So I just pick up whatever job I have possible. So I would say at any given time, I always have three jobs. I don't know why, but just like maximize my thing. And I got into sales really by accident. I was just it was a job that's available, and I when I started, I don't have any teacher. I just they were like, "I'll give you a chance," and contracted, and then I
yeah,
just nailed it. And since then, I've
yeah,
been yeah, it's I would say it's rare to see native immigrants become sales professional. And people tell me like you
right,
cannot work in sales because you don't speak
right.
English. And then when I did it, well, I said, look, I did it. And they were like, well, you can't be sales leader because that. And then I was like, I did it. Right. So there was, I feel like my story, a lot of women's like, you're just breaking glass ceiling over another.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm kind of lucky in a sense, kind of a fearless, mainly because I'm
yeah,
ignorant. I didn't know those are not allowed. And I did it. And
yeah, yeah. Well, I think there's some to that. I mean, clearly there's this theme in your life around adventure and being on the edge. And so part of it is your willingness to be fearless. Number two, I think to your point, there's this idea of luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity. And someone gave you the opportunity and then you crushed it.
Yeah,
And I mean, I think it'd be great to talk about you eventually became CRO of Get Prime, which
exactly.
is on a crazy growth trajectory. Would you mind spending a little bit of time talking about what was happening there and how you caught GitLab and how that all played out?
Yeah, totally. So that's back in 2015. So I've been entering into the SaaS worlds, a great AE, and so a couple of things happened that year. So the CEO of user testing was like, I don't know, this lady who can't speak anything I understand. Now all of a sudden she's our best performing AE. I also got into Berkeley MBA program. At on the side, I was helping my husband run his other startup. So I've been learning day and night in this, and we also doing a little bit angel investing of things. So making friends, looking at startup, doing a little bit angel investing, and then so one day the CEO of Git Prime joined show up in our house because he's joined a YC program at that time, and our
Mhm.
house is like walkable distance to the YC thing. So it was like, hey,
Oh,
I know you're a startup CEO, you probably are stingy. So why don't you just stay at
right.
our house? So we just stay at the house, we chat about his challenges, and yeah, these are co-founders who does engineering work. They don't speak
Yeah.
any sales language. So we start
Yeah.
eating and drinking, and I have a brutal, honest personality, and with a little bit of alcohol, I probably insulted the CEO quite a bit. It's like, you guys are not doing sales, you are just talking and praying, you know, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I don't know what's going on. He was desperately looking for a sales leader, but everyone else
Right.
recommended to different kind of sales leader, and they were like either too scared about going to startup or not wanting to do the very technical product because it's very selling to engineering leaders. A lot of salespeople
Yeah.
are like, I'm not technical. So
Yeah.
I was not pitching myself at all. But anyway, second day I woke up, I was offered a CRO job. I don't know what happened.
That's
Drunk.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
And and so it was cooking, right? 300 percent year over year. You were there, and so that's 300% year over year for 4 years in a row. You were there from 0 to 15 million.
Exactly. So 0 to 15 million. So we were growing 300% year over year, and
Hmm.
literally building a company for ground up. One woman team to like later on, I was managing a team of 76 professionals go to market. And
Wow.
then yeah, we're really fast. And the next year we'll be like, okay, after 15 million, that will be 40, and then after that would be
Yeah.
80, and then after that it's
Yeah.
100 million. And my goal is like, I want to give Prime to be a little bit like GitLab because they are both in YC and
Right.
GitLab is 1 year ahead. It's
Yep.
like, how can we make Git Prime $1 billion business? B, right?
Right.
So, but then we
Yep.
got acquired. It was really quick, like less than 30 days, it
Yeah.
was done. So,
Wow.
I think,
Well, you were living the dream, hanging out on couches and sharing stories and finding a great company. And it was then that I think you had your first insight around what was holding Get Prime back. Even though you're growing 300% year over year, what was the number one thing that you sort of saw and has really influenced the rest of your career?
yeah, totally. I think part of the reason we decided to sell rather than grow into a $1 billion business is the leaky bucket problem. I mean,
Right.
the 20% leaky bucket at that time was not, it was okay. Year one, year two, year three, year four, really, really ouch. 20% but leaking bucket
Yeah.
is really, really hurting us.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking like, I will be honest, me at that time, I'm not expert in retention space. I mean, I can probably say I'm now talking to a lot of CRO that come from a similar background as me, like new sales, moving to the CRO. I was not expert in NRR. I know it's, customer success or retention is actually a harder problem to solve than retention than like getting new business, right?
Right.
It's actually problem solving. It's actually involved different team members and strategies of that. It's way complicated problem. And like most CRO who are not expert in this area, we just hire a CCO who think is gonna do
Yeah.
that. Not really. I mean, the whole industry didn't really figure out how to do this, I would say.
Right. I think that's great. And just for some folks who may not be familiar with all the terminology, so often salespeople, VPs of sales, are responsible for new logo acquisition, where they're going out and bringing customers in. And then what you were describing as a leaky bucket is often described as your retention, your ability to retain that customer. So when you have a 20% leaky bucket, that's 20% churn. Or if you were to flip that around, retention, that's about 80% retention. And what we find is best in class companies are north of 90%, because the idea is if you're losing 20% of your customers at the beginning of every year, you have to start over and fill that leaky bucket with that that amount of revenue just to even get back to where your starting point was before you start to layer in new logos. And with the SaaS model, the idea is you get a customer, you keep a customer, customers for life. You hopefully have them, and that's measured in terms of gross retention. And then you were alluding to another metric, net retention, is where you get to grow them. They grow either by buying more seats, or they're buying more products, or they're division hopping. So that whole complexity around how do you keep, secure, and expand current customers is hard. To your point, I know when I was at Salesforce, I worked for Maria Martinez, who ran the customer for life business. And at a company that big, your install base, your number of customers and dollars associated with the customers is just, it dwarfs
Hmm.
what your new logos are.
Yeah.
And it's what drives the value of the business. And so you sold to Pluralsight. Congratulations. That was the first of your first exit. And then you went over with your husband to Nuff Said. And in this role now, you're managing both revenue and customer success. Tell me more about how you thought about customer data to prioritize your day, and why that was the value prop for the company. Like what was Nuff Said doing?
Well, I want to correct a little bit. So at Git Prime,
Sorry.
I do manage everything post sale. So I
Ah,
manage
okay.
new sales team, CS team, professional services team. So anything from from the day, anything customer facing. So we also have
Yep.
a VP of CS or CCO reporting directly to me.
Okay.
Um,
Got it.
but I would say at that time, I as an executive, I wasn't savvy in terms of how I'm not expert in solving the NRR problem. At that time, I wasn't.
Right.
Now I am, unfortunately.
Yep.
Um, I know
Yep.
too much on that. So what I did is I outsourced this job to a CCO, which then I managed the
Right.
CCO, and I was very frustrated with the result. Even though I love that
Right.
person on CCO, it's
Yep.
great. I would work with him in a heartbeat. What I realized later on when I go into NetSet and they said now, it's like it's not those individual people's fault. It's the whole system, the whole industry, how they solve this problem is completely wrong. So it needs to be reinvented. That's what I found now.
Okay.
So it's nobody can solve that problem if we continue the way we're solving it now.
Well, that's a great sort of segue into the conversation. How do you think the current industry is solving it incorrectly, and what do you think are the things that need to be done to make it better?
Well, you not at this point you probably know me. I'm more like an honest person, so I'm gonna spit it out. So I would say in a funny joke, a lot of companies are complaining about their team not being proactive enough. I would say the current way of us solving the retention problem, we are all born in the year of sitting ducks. Okay, so it's very reactive response.
Right.
Yet the executive, including me, the CRO, the CEO, COO, wanted this sitting ducks to be the dragon and make it rain. But yet you don't give
Hmm.
them feed enough the food. You give them the sitting duck
Right.
diet, and you want them to perform like a dragon. It's just impossible, right?
Hmm.
So
Okay.
I can tell you why this is a problem. So I actually right now I'm almost finishing my 50 interviews of SaaS companies. Um, So I'm like 40 something, 10 away to complete that. But
Hmm.
now I'm seeing some trend. So when I ask people like, how do your team know if the customer is about to churn? Like any early
Right.
indicators you can see the customer's churn. It's very interesting. Some people will use very complicated, like, oh, behavioral analytic. I mean, it's basically saying we're looking at product usage, right? If they're using it or not using it, basically say if they use it, they must receive value. I can't agree with
Hmm.
that. Also, you're missing out the decision makers who doesn't use your product, right? There are decision makers, budget holders, executive sponsors who doesn't use your product. You don't know what they're thinking, right? You could see, oh,
Right.
product usage is great. My champion is talking to me, I'm great, but you don't miss out. You don't understand what the company's priority has shifted. They have already decided to cut you out. You don't know any of that. So that's why I say, like, when I say how do you prevent churn, most people looking at product usage, and
Right.
sometimes they're looking at manually, which means they're not looking. So isn't that a sitting duck? The whole industry is like, oh, I have this book of business. Please don't, they don't churn, they don't churn. And it's this fear of they will churn and trying to please them rather than being proactively making sure they receive value. So what I learned now
Yeah.
is customers, delighting the customers doesn't equals renewal, but making sure the customer receive value does. and
Right.
and there's no metric to make sure that customer receive value. You have CSAT to make sure if the customer is happy. You have NPS, which is basically selfish. So isn't it sitting duck? You're like, hopefully the product usage doesn't drop. Like by the time the product usage dropped, it's already too late. It's a symptom.
Yeah.
So every time when I ask someone like, hey, why does your customer churn? And then some CEOs respond, oh, they didn't use our product enough. Well, that's
Right.
a symptom, the end result, not the reason. It just shows that how, there's so many C-level executives are so far away from the reality. They don't understand why. They just look at the symptom. They just look at the reporting. If you look at, ask any C-level exec, or they would say, oh, we log our reasoning why customer churn in Salesforce. And you will know the reason are the same, oh, budget loss, oh, champion leaving the company, or the products don't use. It's the same bullshit reasons. It's not a true reason, right?
Okay, so let's I'll just summarize because I think we've this is great. And part of what you're doing, they said, is creating a new way of doing this. So we'll talk a little bit about that solution. The thing that you've been doing recently is this research report, which you alluded to, which you're out, you've interviewed 50 companies, but even back when you were at Enough Said, you had interviewed 400 companies, right?
Right.
400 customers to talk about it. They love the idea of using customer data to prioritize their day, but they don't have actionable customer data, and that's where what I remember you were talking about is they were using things like product usage, they were using ticket volume, and these were all kind of lagging indicators, but didn't allow customer success professionals to be proactive. So before we get into more of the details of they said in the research report, how do you know? So, what's your recommendation? What's your solution? What are you telling people they need to do differently compared to what they're currently doing in terms of understanding customers, whether customers are happy, are they going to buy more, and then in doing so, increase your gross retention and increase your net retention?
Totally. So to answer this question, I'll make up the second half of finding we have. So preventing
Okay.
churn, most companies say, look at what customers do, product usage. Okay. When I ask them, how do you know the customers will buy more from you? And 100% companies say, oh, we do it by talking to the customers in the form of QBR,
Right.
check-ins, whatever, talking to the customers. So this tell me that the company believe preventing churn by looking at what they do, finding growth by looking at what they say, right? Which
Right.
means they're not really doing it because, like, for example, I'm customer of Rippling, I'm customer of Hotspot, I'm customer of Carter. How often do I talk to my AM CSM? Maybe once every 2 years. So that means you are not talking to them, right? So when you say, oh, we talk
Right.
to our customers, bullshit. It means you don't do anything. So you have a huge mismatch of like, I want to grow my existing revenue. That's more important than
Right.
preventing churn. But what action do you do? Right? There's
Yeah.
no good actions. So, and in today's economy where things are so, you have to require people to do more with less. You know, these CSNs, ANs, AEs are tasked with like 1 to 1,000 customers or 1 to hundreds. Like they're not doing the growth for you. You don't know.
They're not being set up for success. I
No.
do think that's one of the challenges you see in lots of companies is especially early stage startups. They go out and they close new business and then they say, "Oh gosh, we got to retain customers." They hire some CSMs, they put them on it, but to your point in your interviews, you're finding that the account ratios are so high that there's no way that the CSMs could be doing regular touch bases so they could really know about if customers are being successful. And part of that is at that early stage company, unless you're totally focused on enterprise sales, you have lots of customers with relatively small ACV, five to 10,000 bucks. So to afford the CSM, you got to load them up with a lot of accounts. So you're kind of in this catch 22 of they need to have a big enough book of business to offset what you got to pay for them, but the book of business is too big for them to be able to do what you really need them to do, which is deep understanding of the customer, their pain points, the value that you're delivering, and reinforcing that value throughout the process of implementation and adoption so that a renewal is a non-issue,
Exactly. But
right?
also there's another thing is like you are expecting the sitting ducks who are born in the sitting duck with that expectation be dragons, meaning they need to ask strategic questions to the right people at the
Right.
right time. How are they going to do it?
Right.
It's impossible, right? Now you can see my
So
frustration.
you're also talking about a capability thing, in that often customer success folks are brought up and to be responsive, but in doing so, it's not. It's almost. I see this in your energy. It's turned. You need to become more commercial, more aligned, like what a salesperson does. But I think what you find, having been in customer success a long time, is there's this tension. The people who take care of the customers and want to make them happy, it's hard to then ask them, no, no, no. You also need to come in and ask for the renewal and ask for the upsell. It's a different skill set. It's a different way of viewing your roles and responsibilities. Okay, so you've outlined all these problems. What have you seen as the solution, or what is your recommendation for the solution to help people focus on customer retention and drive net retention going forward?
Yeah. So my the solution is the company I actually created. They said for that. So look, we are companies executives. We're not kindergarten kids. We had to pick between candy or soda. Why can't we have both? So the idea is how do we automate the signal? So our idea is like we set up journey-based personalized question along the customer journey. And then we ask the customers those strategic questions and then to uncover the churn risk and signal before product usage. So my idea is take advantage of a time. So like product usage usually coming a little bit or later, but
Right.
before product usage coming or companies deciding or thinking about switching you, they've already have a mind and just ask them. They'll tell you. So
Hmm.
but the CSNs might not know who to ask. Why don't we automate this
Right.
where we ask all the
Right.
people at the right time the right question? Then the CSN would do a
Right.
very good job of following up with them. So then you solve the
Right.
problem. Usually we see like account coverage somewhere between 40 to 60%. So now you have 40 to 60% of customers who respond to you and telling you all this before product usage come down. Now, okay, so then what about the customer who doesn't tell you or don't respond to you, right? So this group of customers has highest risk of churning. They've already
Right.
give up on you, right? Then you're not
Yeah.
sacrificing anything. Use your old school product uses, whatever thing you're doing.
Right.
But then you now target
Right.
you are already save half of the customers who are willing to talk to you. And then the remaining one you will know they have high risk. Now we need to look into what they are doing and get executive involved and things like this. So why not we do it?
Right. So
It's cheap, effective, right?
So part of this is how do you create prioritization? And so for the customers that are responding to you and giving you good, you don't take it for granted, but you say thank you. You have good conversations, and those that are yellow through their responses, you're able to really have strategic engagement, direct engagement, and then to your point, you're able to prioritize the remaining customers. So those are the biggest. You focus your effort and energy there. And I think that's the biggest challenge with CSMs is they spend all their time every day trying to figure out where should they spend their time because they're always feeling behind. One question I have for you earlier in our conversation, you said, "Gosh, Randy, there are people out there that you may not have any relationship with. So you're working with the user
Right.
of your application, but you're not interacting with the buyer." So, do you find when you roll out these specific journey based questions based on different roles, so they're tailored to roles, that you have buyers engaging and filling out the feedback, or if they don't know your technology? So, for example, Maxio, we want to sell to CFOs, CEOs use our technology to better understand what's happening in their business and running their reports. When I was CEO of Percolate and we brought in the legacy Maxio product called SaaS Optics, I don't know if I would have remembered it was SaaS Optics that I was using for my reports. So I don't know if I would have responded to a journey based, tailored question. So for
Yeah.
buyers, the people you're not engaging with, what's your expectation in terms of getting them to respond and provide insight into how they're thinking?
I can quote some of our customers saying like, I don't know, you know, why, but they don't respond to me as a CSM, but they will respond these questions because it's very specific
Mm,
for them. And secondly, normally when you in order to get upsell cross sell from executives, you had to go through so many gatekeepers in order to get that
right.
person. But a simple question, and it's about designing the question. Ask selfish questions like NPS. How likely am I gonna recommend Maxio? That's not to
Yeah.
them, but asking questions they care, like, hey, as a CFO of Maxio, is improving NRR important to you? Right? We can ask
Yeah.
that kind of question. If they say yes, then usually it's a more scaling one. Like
Yeah.
react to these statements. Improving NRR
Right.
is a key initiative in 2024. And if they say
So
five,
rather than yes, no, you're getting more of an indication of value or importance.
yeah,
Yep.
importance of
Got it.
those things. So I would say most people in the industry are not experts in sending survey questions. So
Yeah.
that's why NPS and CSAC is popular, because if you do those two questions, even though it's low impact,
Yep.
you won't be fired because everyone else is doing the same freaking
Right.
question, right?
It's on everybody's scorecard, right? NPS and CSAC.
Exactly.
Uh, So there's another real insight that I think you have in terms of ownership of the metric, which I think speaks to when we were chatting about. They said you're like, part of your challenge, even though you can help prevent churn within 8 days of implementing your solution. Part of the challenge is you don't have a clear ICP because it's hard to know who to sell it to. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you're finding from the research report in terms of everybody talks about gross retention as being critical, but nobody owns it? Like, what have you learned there?
Yeah, totally. So it's when I ask anyone, hey, is NRR important? Everyone say, yeah, NRR is super important. Just like I ask people, do you want to get rich? Everyone say, yeah, I want to get rich. But how many people are taking action? And when I look at this, I think there is some problem with companies' organization. So let's look at this.
Mm,
If you are a tiny company where most of your revenue comes from new business, you don't give a shit about retention. Sorry about that word, but
right.
it's true. Based on activity, you might say, I care about, you don't. Okay. Now, when you are a larger company, retention becomes important because you are
Right.
suffering from the leaky bucket, just like I do, or you need to grow the business. Now,
Yep.
then the problem is multiple owners, too many cook in the kitchen. So there's
Right.
no one person who's directly in charge of NRR. Like there's no chief NRR officer. Let me tell you.
Hmm.
So for your SMB customers, like a lot of your long tail customers, um,
Mhm.
you don't. These customers don't have a dedicated CSM on it. They are managed by a pooled CSM, like a marketing-ish CSM. They
Mm,
use tools, and
mhm.
then that person, the person who's in charge of that, is usually head of marketing, CMO, or chief growth officer. Okay, something like that.
Mhm.
Then when you go into the mid-market enterprise fields, these accounts are co-managed by CSMs and AMs, and then they all
Mhm.
have different things agenda for that. Then the third group is like strategic accounts, right? 1
Right.
million is the sales are on it, right? So if you want to improve the
Right.
company's NRR program, let's say I'm a CEO, the investors telling me in order to raise a Series C or going public, I need to improve NRR. What do? I have all these people wanting to have a game in this and want to have a say on this. Okay. So that's one difficulty. And then pair with how each company make decision is very difficult. So when I'm a little bit non-naive at Gipran as a CIO, I think hippo management, meaning highest paid person's opinion, decision making is bad. Now I think it's actually not as bad as I thought. The reason why is
Okay. Well, mhm.
I can tell you why. So
Okay.
at least with hippo management, you have one person that make decision,
Right.
so
Right.
things will get done, right? So with the
Hmm.
with the and then the worst is like when I ask people, how do you guys make decisions, and they will be like, oh, we have some kind of group decision, like the
Right.
group team voting. So if you have a kind of team voting, which means the loudest person's opinion will matter.
Yeah.
Okay, so what will happen is for NRR project, the end result is the head of support may make the decision. Why? Because
Right.
head of support also touches this, and then but they have nothing to do with NRR. And why are you get being the person getting to make the decision? Because they have the loudest voice. It's like, oh, we already have a lot of ticket coming in. Our team can handle more tickets or hear more customer feedback, so we don't want to do it. I mean, from that person's perspective, I understand because their perspective is I need to make sure this team I'm managing, either the support
Yeah.
team, the success team, they can, I mean, churn or retention is a team effort. And these leaders
Right.
cannot make decisions to impact product, marketing, sales. They can only make changes in a little sitting duck pen of like, I can only make my team better. So that's how they make the decision. So you can see why, if you have this kind of decision making dynamic and this kind of ownership of churn, you as a company can never fix the NRR problem. I'm so sorry. This is
So let
the
me ask
reality.
make a quick comment, and then I'll come back and ask for your recommendation. Then, so when I talk about having been in the military for a couple of years, one of the things you learn in the military is this idea: lead, follower, get out of the way. And you start in the military learning how to be a good follower, and then you're expected to learn how to be a leader. And at different times, you're going to be doesn't matter how senior you are, you're either going to be a leader or a follower. And so I think to your point, one of the things you get super clear about is whose area of responsibility is this and what's the decision to be made, and then how are you going to make that decision, i.e. is it your decision or my decision, or someone else's, and let them make the decision. I think in the corporate sector, when I transitioned to the corporate sector, it became lead, follower, let's talk about it. And to your point, I would be in bigger companies. We would sit around conference tables, and I would try to say, okay, so what is the decision we're trying to make, and who's going to make the decision? And I think you find in large companies that everyone thinks they have the veto, meaning they could kill a decision, but very few people are willing to stand up and say, no, I got this. I'm owning this, and I'm going to drive it forward. And I'm willing to take your input, and I will be dependent on you for your support. I got to lead through influence to get this thing done. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do it. So, other than making decision making authority more clear and articulating how a decision is going to be made, those two elements, what are you seeing as a best practice in terms of having companies evolve their organizational structure so that they really are focused on GRR? So it's not BS, like you said. Like you really do have someone. What has to change for that to be true?
I would say one of the important thing is making, we actually adopt this ourselves, as they said, every decision need to have one decision maker. Like
Mm,
it doesn't matter, like everyone, you can't have like multiple people decision maker, right? One person need to
right.
own it directly. And then secondly
Yeah.
is how do you make decision process? So like if I am a decision maker, I make decisions, say I want to try this new initiative. It's new,
Right.
it's scary, but I want to try it. And if you or someone else want to challenge my decision, I welcome you to challenge. But if you need to challenge me and make me change my decision, you need to come up with data that is higher degree than mine. So we talk about the four levels of decision making. So let's say customer data, is the number one most important decision. Number two is experts' views, right? Number three is team experience. And number four is personal experience. Maybe you as a CS leader working your personal experience. We don't give a shit about your personal opinion. Opinion
So I
equals
think that's a really interesting. So I think this is we were talking about this before. It was about the decision, but it was really about the data. There's different tiers of data. First is customer data. That's going to be primary. If you can make a decision, if you're contesting, like I talk about the ladder of inference. There's Stephen Covey had published this idea, and that you people argue in the realm of ideas. And what's key when you're trying to make the best decision is create a common understanding of the assumptions. So what are the assumptions that people have? And then below that is what data. So if I have a difference of opinion with you, I ask you, hey, what are your assumptions? And then what's the data that's informing your opinion? We walk down your ladder of inference. Then I share mine, and you create a broader understanding. And then from that, you can still make a different decision because it depends on who's ultimately responsible for it. But at least you have an engaging conversation that's rooted in data versus opinion. And so for you, what you're outlining, which I think was super helpful, is customer data is most important. So you have to have a system of record. You have to understand what's happening with customers. Number two is you go to analysts like SGI or Alexander when you're talking about sales, or you could go to McKinsey, Bain, BCG, any of these big strategy companies. But then the third level is if they're not there to provide pattern matching across a plethora of companies, is if you have specific team experience as an organization, or you come in like I hired a new CFO. The CFO that I hired had multiple years of experience working at other SaaS companies. He'd worked at a PE firm, multiple PE firms. So he's coming in with a very informed opinion of how do you run a company in line with PE expectations. So probably knows more than the analysts
right.
that are out there, but his experience is more relevant than mine experience. My experience for, how do you recognize CS? Is it above the line, below the line? I don't know. I have an opinion,
Yeah,
but he's got the experience. So I think that was what we were talking about, was the levels of data. But you invite people into the conversation and into the decision making process, but they have to come with data.
exactly. I would make it very transparent. Say we make decision to do that based on this data, and not every
Right.
time you can get customer data. We're kind of lucky
Right.
because we're in the business of collecting customer data, so we can kind of prove it to you in 8 days. So here's go. Challenge me with
Yeah.
your better data. But in companies who doesn't value the architect like hierarchy of value of data, their personal experience can out trump your proven
That's
fact
right.
customer data, and that's just not ideal. But there's a hope in terms of like there is a new kind of a job title called CCO, Chief Customer
Yeah.
Officer, and I
Yeah.
see that this group of I've seen like CCO either go upward, become like CEO, COOs. Like for example,
Mm.
CCO of Hotspot, she's now a CEO. I become a CEO.
Hmm.
There's some
Yep.
going on like very strategic ones go up that way because if you can be a CCO, you touch every single department like sales,
Right.
sales, CS, support, professional service, marketing, product. Like you touch everything. You know, a CCO is a multi-departmental executive. You need to know that.
Well, that's what I would find. I mean, I think in my experience, people like Maria Martinez, who just recently retired, but had an incredibly successful at Salesforce, and I think she went to Cisco. Um, she owned that. She owned everything post sales,
Yeah,
and she just leadership through influence. She was able to drive gross retention and net retention um, on that level. But I think to your point, that CCO really has to have stepped up from just being responsive to being proactive and being strategic in terms of how do you drive adoption, but also how do you drive expansion? How do you prevent churn? And so I think there's an opportunity if you have a leader who has that remit, who's at the end of the day responsible for gross retention. So my new head of customer success, for example, is someone who said, look, dude, your number one thing is to focus on gross retention. That's across all segments and all products. So we don't have that same challenge that you're outlining in terms of, hey, well, the highest tier goes off to sales. He's responsible for everything.
yeah.
So I think
I would
it's
say
a
I still
single
see
point. Mhm.
challenges in the CCO worlds. I can tell you why.
Mm.
Okay, so at this point, I've seen hundreds of CCOs. So CCOs usually out of all executives are the most caring, empathetic,
Mm.
inclusive
Mm.
executive, almost like a benevolent servant-based leadership style, right? You can
More than
see
heads of HR?
more than head of HR.
Okay. All right.
To me,
All
I feel
right.
like they're just really, really nice person, and they really
Yeah.
understand the customers, and they also are very, kind of together with the teams. So what I
Yeah.
see is that it's good. Like, usually all team members respect that leader. But from an executive point, like if I have a CCO like that, I might be a little bit frustrated. Mainly because I feel like they're more a caterpillar rather than a dragon. They should be a dragon.
Mm.
The shape is the
Mm.
same, but the thing is they have many
Right.
foot. Right, because CCOs usually adopt the decision making process of team effort. And then the
Right.
CCO usually manage the CS team, the onboarding team, the support team, the professional service team. When I tell you, like, ultimately NRR decision later on get vetoed by a head of support who has no relationship with the
Right.
NRR. So that's like, I
Right.
would say, if anything, if one suggestion I give to the CCOs, like, own your metric and own
Got it.
make decision with data rather than like team effort.
Awesome. And so we were just shifting as we start to wrap up a little bit. One, you had three things that you've learned in your different roles. One was be data driven in your decision making. We talked a lot about that, the hippo versus the one decision maker, and then the data that you're using. Number two was opportunity always favor those who are prepared. And we've talked about your background and experience and how at each stage you were presented with an opportunity, you said yes fearlessly and stepped forward and you were successful. Even sometimes you didn't know what it meant, but you just went forward. The third one we talked about was being a customer driven CEO. And you're talking a little bit about having come from China and Confucius, know yourself, know your enemy. Like, help me understand how you think about everyone says they want to be a customer driven CEO. What does that really mean? And your experience when you came on not speaking English very well. And so you learned English through your customer experience. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think my entire speaking vocabulary of English, I learned from talking to thousands of customers or prospects that they teach me how they're thinking. So like I think at the end of Git Prime days, when I was just getting out of people think I talk like engineering leaders, like a VP of Eng, because I
Mm,
learned all the
mm,
vocabulary from them. And in terms of customer first, I would say there's two group of thoughts. One group of thought is that if you ask the customer what they want, they will want a faster horse, right? So is the Henry Ford saying. So there's
right.
also the other group that really truly believe in listening to the customer feedback and improve. I belong to the second, but my opinion, I've seen a lot of product leaders or CEOs saying if you listen to your customer too closely, it's actually very dangerous. Because they say,
Mm,
"Oh, I wanted a pink outlook. I want a white dot. I want this." Like, yes, if you don't know how to listen to the customer properly, it's tremendously dangerous because they will be going all over the
right.
place. So my advice and from my learning is like, listen to the customer's pain and problems,
Mm,
but not
mm,
solutions.
mm, hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think because they may not uh, they don't know what you know about how to create that solution to address the pain. But if you get at the core pain, they're willing to buy, and if you can deliver the value, and so you're removing that pain or helping them step into the promised land, they'll stay customers for life.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, with that, Lihong, it's been a lot of fun catching up with you and hearing more about your journey, talking about dragons and caterpillars and ducks. If people want to find you, I assume they can find you on LinkedIn,
Right.
and they come to your site. They said, which again really focuses on how to solve retention problems. It comes from all of your experience talking to thousands of customers and how to do it in a way that provides real data and insights. Are there other places you'd like them to track you down, like on Twitter or I guess we call it X now? Like, how else will they find you out in the interweb?
Linking is the best one. I am starting to build kind of a YouTube channel doing
Okay.
kind of quick knowledge sharing with people in the industry, but
Yeah.
it's still in progress. So right now, linking is still the best way to find
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time, Lihong. Best of luck, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Sounds good. Awesome.